Hello and welcome to the Waynesburg Effect, the only political talk show here on WCTV. Today our panelists will be analyzing three topics from across the political sphere. First, we will discuss the government shutdown and the implications for both sides moving forward. Then we will discuss the stare-down scene across the country and the social ramifications. Finally, we will throw it back and discuss our favorite founding fathers and their impact on today's political world. I'm your host, Drew Rhea, joined on the desk today by Michael Capelli, Dakota Kiefer, and Jared Weicker. Relax, get comfortable, and get ready to enjoy some heated political debate here on the Waynesburg Effect.
You don't know what's going to happen with the hurricane. You cannot predict its path.
And he didn't clearly understand what his job was there to do.
And that's sad because he's just a statistic now.
Total lunacy.
It's an alarming statistic.
That ended up winning the National League to face the Red Sox in the World Series.
But clearly he didn't understand the context of the speech.
If you haven't heard me talk about this yet, I'm sorry.
Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now.
Take the time and do what makes you happy.
The 35-day government shutdown has been ended while both sides continue to feud on immigration. The left believes President Trump's wall is racist and unnecessary, while the political right believes it is critical to increasing border security. Michael, I'll ask you, what are your thoughts on the great political stalemate?
So I think it's the fault of both sides. There's no really one true side to blame. They couldn't agree on a budget. What they could agree on is that a shutdown was a horrible idea, and it went into effect anyway, and they blame each other for the shutdown. But in the simplest and most direct terms, Democrats are certainly to blame for the government shutdown. They decided to block a continuation of government funding that included nothing with which they disagree. But Republicans are to blame as well. They could have pushed to change the rules to allow for automatic funding resolutions to patch these very impasses, but they didn't. And it is, quite frankly, it was irresponsible.
I agree with you that both parties are at fault. I'd also like to point out the fact that in President Trump's campaign, he also promised that Mexico would pay for the wall. So that didn't happen, and everyone knew that that was out of the ordinary. That would never happen. That didn't happen. But I also would like to point out that 2 years of House control the Republicans had under President Trump. And you know how many times they funded a border wall? Zero. No. They funded fencing, and maybe it's because they don't think the border wall is a good idea either, because it's really not. It's not going to be that much better than a fence system. And I'd also like to point out the fact that President Trump made it seem like the wall was getting funded even last year. Back into March and April, he released statements about $1.6 billion. He's not happy about it, but it'll start the wall. Well, it didn't start the wall, so what message was he trying to send?
Well, the good news is Mexico will be paying for the wall actually through the new deals that we created by abolishing NAFTA that President Trump has done. But also building a wall will increase the security on the border. I mean, people like to talk about how it's not going to stop drugs and other things, but it's known that that's not really the purpose. It's just to keep people out. Plus, it'll provide jobs when they build it. And also, the Democrats are the biggest problem with the shutdown. I mean, they're the real reason. Are Republicans really supposed to back down on their claims of building the wall? Because if they give the Democrats some leverage, I mean, the new story will be that Republicans will cave into Democrats' demands.
But Republicans also haven't shown any interest in reforming anything. They're both locked in this stalemate. And while I do agree that Democrats are at fault, what we should look into is Republicans also being at fault because they're not showing any sort of resolve or any sort of willingness to reform anything.
Well, my point is that if they were to do that, the Republicans, if they were to show signs of wanting to make a deal with the Democrats, that it would just destroy the purpose to begin with. That's why there is a shutdown, because President Trump doesn't want to give the Democrats any leverage.
And here's another reason that I don't think President Trump wants reform. It's because I don't believe the $5.7 billion is enough to build the wall anyways. So that's already shortcoming it when trying to build the wall. So if they give him any less than that, then how's he ever going to get the wall done? And I think that's a big reason why President Trump and the Republicans don't want to meet in the middle, because the $5.7 billion already might be the middle. And the fact that the Democrats aren't funding that and don't want that, I understand it. I understand that the Democrats, I mean, it's the two-party system. They go back and forth. They just want to disagree with each other, and that's it. And I think it's kind of a childish game of cat and mouse. We have the whole State of the Union debacle. That it might not happen when it's supposed to happen now because of this whole situation. And President Trump went at Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. She couldn't go on her trip overseas after she said he couldn't perform the State of the Union. So it's kind of childish, and it's just pretty pathetic of our political system in America. And I think both parties are completely to blame for this. I don't really think any side more than the other.
Well, if you go, I agree 100%. But if you look in terms of the public, who the public is going to blame, I have every confidence this is going to be Republicans because the public sees Republicans as the anti-government party. And now that the government shut down, big business can do whatever it wants, or not necessarily, but big business can start to take over, and that idea is deeply embedded in public consciousness, as much as it is, as Democrats are viewed as the party broadening the welfare state.
Yeah, I think when you look at this long term, when you're dealing with the question of who's going to be blamed more for this debacle whenever it ends, we have that temporary break in it now, but that's only until, I believe, the middle of February that they're going to fund the government. So when we look, once this is all wrapped up, who they're going to blame more, honestly, I think it depends on which party's in charge, which is usually the way it goes. If the Republicans hold charge, I think that it'll be looked at as, and the shutdown costs right now already have passed the cost of funding the wall. So I think as long as Republicans are in control of the government, that's going to be the view. But say the wall ends up being built, or border security is strengthened, I think the next liberal president, if there's a wall, what's going to be a huge base driver, what's going to get the base charged up is, of course, tearing down the wall. So this whole fiasco is just going to continue to be a partisan battle, I think, for years to come.
And that's exactly what it is. It's all political parties. It's not even the fact that some disagree with them. They don't actually disagree. They just want to disagree with the other party. And that's how it's been for years. And that's, I think, the way that America is just going. And it's a sad state that it's in. But even not only in our actual government officials, but just regular people. I mean, if they see you as a liberal and they're a conservative, they automatically think they disagree with everything you say, and that's just how it is. And I don't think that's the right way. I think you have to compromise. You have to understand that both sides have good points, have good ideas, and you have to be able to listen. But at this point, that's just not how it's been in this country.
Yeah, and so, and going back, even within Congress, Republicans are kicking down any sort of budget that the Democrats come up with, and Democrats are doing the same thing. And Democrats are willing to hold government funding hostage, and they've prioritized 700,000 DACA recipients over American citizens and their children. And I'm not saying that's necessarily right, but what needs to happen is they have to be able to agree on something to get the government up and running.
Yeah, I think right now the shutdown will be viewed as the Republicans' fault by most of the public. But I think it really depends on what ends up happening, kind of as Drew pointed out, if the wall does get built. But really, I think eventually when we look back at this and say 5 or 10 years, it could ultimately just switch and be the Democrats' fault because of what happens.
Well, I think certainly this is going to be something that carries on past. I can't see a permanent solution coming about before that middle of February. I think that, like Michael said, we get past the State of the Union, more immigration talk continues, and then eventually we shut down again, and this will just carry on, and we'll see where it goes. But when we get back, we'll talk about the highly controversial stare down between a Catholic teen and a Native American man. Stay tuned. You're watching The Waynesburg Effect.
You're watching The Buzz, your place for all things Waynesburg. I'm Lindsay Stinger, your campus news host.
My name is Brian Bauer.
I'm Andrew Sloboda, your entertainment host.
My name is Corey Tertinick, and I'm here with this week's entertainment news.
On campus. And remember, it's all of your beeswax.
It's all of your beeswax. Remember, it's all of your beeswax.
Welcome into another edition of Jacket Sports Weekly.
Homecoming game against Carnegie Mellon. And finally, Hugh, we're starting to see this offense put together some drives and really...
We kind of saw the offense just compile together and have a great showing. Chad Walker, 61 rushing yards and a touchdown. And the receivers, it just wasn't one main guy. It was Cole Booth, Jawan.
25-23 and 25-18. But perhaps the biggest takeaway in that match, all of whom had season highs. They only had one block in the entirety of the match.
We run our best race at regionals, we can make it to nationals.
Continuously see him. We saw him a couple weeks ago. Game-clinching interception for the football team.
Just because the government was shut down does not mean the action stops. On January 18th, the March for Life rally took place, coinciding with the Indigenous Peoples March in Washington, D.C. Video surfaced that day of a stare-off between a Native American man and a teenage Catholic boy wearing a Make America Great Again hat. Many media sources reported on the story that the boy was trying to intimidate the Native American man. Days later, a full video emerged showing how the standoff came about and showing that another group, the Black Hebrew Israelites, were also involved in the standoff. The Catholic school represented in the video has received multiple threats since the incident, and the boy, Nick Sandman, has received multiple death threats as well. Dakota, what is your take on this whole stare-down issue that has been very controversial and very well played out in the media in recent days?
See, I'm not going to lie. When I first saw the initial video, I was on the side of the Indigenous man, and I still am to an extent, but I'm not going to completely blame the boy on the fact that he was being racist or he was being hateful. I do think that he handled the situation wrong. I don't know why he was standing a foot away from the man, smiling in his face, but we didn't hear about this Black Hebrew Israelites group either, and apparently that's what started the whole thing, is they were going at it with the Catholic teen boys, and then the man, Nathan Phillips, the Indigenous man, came over and he said that he was thinking about trying to play on his drum to try and piece things down between the two groups because they were going at it. And both the left and the right view the Black Hebrew Israelites as a hate group. And they were starting a bunch of controversy. And I think out of anyone, they may be more at fault than any of the two in Sandman and Phillips. So really, it just shows how you could be twisted just by a little video clip. But there is more evidence out there if you dig. And the fact is, it was dug up. They found footage. They found who all was there. But I do think that the teen, Sandman, handled it wrong. I don't understand why he was standing a foot away from him just smiling. It looked kind of like a smirk. It looked kind of like he was being like, I belong here and I don't need to move out of your way. But I don't know if it was necessarily that. I think it was just a bit of a miscommunication from video footage, really.
Yeah, I agree there. What I think happened is that a lot of news stations jumped the gun in covering this because the video went viral on Twitter, and then every major news station jumped all over it and started reporting on it before they really had a story in general. They didn't have the full story. Before they even had a story, they jumped on it, and everyone started forming opinions about what the kid was doing, what Nathan Phillips was doing, and now, admittedly, Nathan Phillips has a little bit of a shady past because he said that he was a Vietnam War vet and he wasn't actually deployed during Vietnam. But all that aside, what happened, what I saw was that the Black Hebrew Israelites were shouting derogatory things and some chants at the Covington Catholic school teens, and they were shouting back, and there was kind of like a verbal sparring match going on. And Nathan Phillips tried to insert himself to, like Dakota said, to try to keep the peace. And then you see the kid, Sandman, stand in front of him and just not move. My thing is why would he just not turn away? Why would he just not go literally anywhere else? Go back and dissolve into the crowd. And it seemed to me that he had a little bit of an arrogant smirk on his face. I'm not saying there was any malicious intent in this at all. I'm just, from what I saw, it looked to be a little bit of an arrogant smirk.
Well, you mentioned that major news stations seem to jump on the story. Well, that's in fact because they wanted to, all right? There was a 2-hour-long clip of the full events that transpired that day. And, this is just another example of how the media has an agenda, and we cannot trust them because they just manipulate things and twist it. I mean, the Black Hebrew Israelites groups were the one that started it all. They were causing the disruption, and they were continually going at the Catholic group. But although people say that they were both fighting back at each other, the Catholic group wasn't really. Like, they were sure, like, hollering back, but it wasn't a big brawl like people were trying to make it. And you know, the Native American guy that was there, and the kids smirking at him, that, you know, it was a big crowd and he couldn't really move. There wasn't a lot of space.
He had space
And
behind him.
He
had a lot of
the
space
Native
behind
American
him.
guy did. He could have moved out
Phillips
of the way.
did not have space. It
problem.
was Sandman that had all the space behind him. Phillips was surrounded by people behind him. Sandman had plenty of room to move back, step away, and instead he chose to stand a foot away from him, smirking at his face, and I just don't understand that. And I'm not completely blaming the kid here, but it just was the wrong way to handle it. He had sort of an entitled smirk on his face when he could have just turned around and walked away, and that would have solved more than not.
Or at the very least, just move out of the shot of the camera.
It's because it was an awkward situation. Like, he was there already. What's he supposed to do? He was refraining from causing further tension with the Native American man. Like, he doesn't have to leave.
If you want to refrain from causing confrontation, then you do leave. You back away. You don't get in someone's face and stand a foot in front of him and just smirk in his face. I don't understand how that's not wanting confrontation. Just leave the situation. Just escort yourself out of it. I'm not saying he had to leave the entire event, but get out of Phillips' face. I don't get it.
Because people made it a big problem. He didn't have to leave. He was just standing there with a smirk because it was an awkward situation. You could tell he wanted to throw insults at him and do stuff, but he didn't, because he refrained, because he was trying to prevent the situation from escalating further.
So then move out of the shot of the camera. If you want to stop it from escalating further, move out of the shot of the camera. Then the video doesn't go viral. Then all these news stations don't jump on this story like they did.
It was going to go viral anyway, because it was a Catholic group with "Make America Great Again" hats on, and it's just another example in the book.
Okay, so
you make yourself look worse.
So we can all agree that there could have been certain steps taken to avoid this situation. I want to get a reaction real quick on the aftermath, what some people said after that video came out, because I think we can all agree that what has happened to this kid, a 16-year-old kid, does not equal the action. Him just standing there does not equal the reaction. Maggie Haberman from the New York Times, "These boys need expelled." Anna Navarro from CNN, "The boys are racists and expletive wipes," attacked the parents too. Bakari Sellers, a legal analyst for CNN, he, meaning Sandman, "is deplorable. Some people can also be punched in the face." So when you have legal contributors and major media players saying things about like this, about a 16-year-old child, just for simply standing there, you know, the interpretation of whether it was a nervous smirk or a privileged smirk is basically up to wherever side you fall on the political spectrum. Kathy Griffin saying, "Name these kids. I want names. Shame them. If you think these blank would not dox you in a heartbeat to think again." Like, stuff like that just really, I mean, I don't want to say that there's a media bias here. Can we agree on that when there's statements about a 16-year-old child and his name being released?
Sure. Yeah, I can agree with that. I do think that it got blown out of proportion. Yeah. But at the same time, like I was saying to Jared, if you didn't want it to be controversial, just move out of the shot of the camera. And yes, that is very, very biased what they did, and that probably should not have happened.
All right, well, I'm sure we haven't heard the end of the story of what happened that Friday afternoon. When we get back, we'll travel back in time and look at some of our favorite founding fathers. You're watching The Waynesburg Effect.
Hello and welcome to The Journey, WCTV's only faith-based program.
Over the course of this semester, we are going to walk with students through their daily lives and take a look at how faith impacts them.
Please take a half hour, sit down, and relax with us as we go on a journey with students, staff, and residents of Waynesburg.
Welcome to Watch This. I'm Brennan Rossai.
And I'm Chris Hulse.
On this show, we look at all of the national movies and TV shows that are making shockwaves throughout the society.
Join us as we review and preview Hollywood's best and worst.
On Watch This.
Welcome back to the Waynesburg Effect. Many of the topics and discussions we have on the show are rooted in political ideology that traces back to the origins of this great nation. The Founding Fathers gave us independence in 1776 and a new system of government in 1787. Jared, I'll start with you. Who is your favorite Founding Father and why?
When I think of Founding Fathers, Benjamin Franklin sticks out a lot to me, and I think he was one of the main big guys that changed this country for what it is today. He was the first to encourage cooperation among British and American colonies, and he was also on the Continental Congress. He mentored other founding fathers like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, and he introduced John Adams to George Washington, and that's when they realized John Adams' ability to be a great leader. And Ben Franklin was also essential in convincing a majority of the delegates to vote in favor of both the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And Ben Franklin, of course, most notably got the French involved, and we all know that without the French help in the Revolutionary War, the colonies would not have been able to win.
Okay, Dakota, what do you think?
So I also had Ben Franklin as an honorable mention, but I have Alexander Hamilton as mine just for the fact that I think he is almost relatable in a sense to just normal people. He was born an illegitimate orphan in the Caribbean. He made his way as an aide to George Washington in the Army. He served as the first Secretary of Treasury of the United States. And also, now I'm not saying this is a good thing, but he became in the middle of one of America's pretty much very first sex scandal. And we've seen many of those now. And we understand that people are humans, they're individuals. But he also did have honor, and he, all the way up until his last breath, was defending his honor and died in a duel to defend that honor. And I think that really speaks volumes about the kind of person he was. Yeah, he had his flaws, everyone does. But I think in terms of the Founding Fathers, he really did have honor and integrity to the very end, and that's pretty much why he died.
Okay, Michael, who do you have?
This is going to seem like a cop-out answer, but I picked George Washington. And here's why. Because while he was president, he was mindful that his actions would determine how future presidents would govern. He worked hard to set examples of fairness, prudence, and integrity. So things like that. And rarely have we seen presidents actually live up to that standard that he set. But most importantly is because he believed that divergent views were critical for the health of a new government, but he was a little bit distressed because what he saw was emerging partisanship, and he despised political partisanship and believed that ideological differences should never become institutionalized. And obviously, we see how well that turned out.
Yeah.
But I wholeheartedly agree with what he was saying about political partisanship and the ideological differences being institutionalized like that.
I as well agree with that sentiment, and that's why I chose James Madison. James Madison really gets the short end of the stick when you talk about today's society. He's not as glamorous as Hamilton. He doesn't have a play or a musical about him. But he was the father of the Constitution, the father of the Bill of Rights, co-authored the Federalist Papers, including number 10, which he wrote, which states, much like George Washington said, that factions, political parties, are evil and usually do away with a society. In history. He supervised the Louisiana Purchase, which to me is the single biggest steel purchase of America's history. It doubled the size of the nation for only $15 million. I have that ranked right above the Yankees stealing Babe Ruth from the Red Sox. I'm sure Joe Smeltzer would disagree with me there. He also fought off a national bank until it was absolutely necessary when the English burned down his house in the War of 1812. And one of the earliest people in America to challenge and question slavery. This man should be on Mount Rushmore. I don't understand it. To this day, I just don't understand how someone so integral in the founding of this nation, and then he followed it up with a pretty decent presidency as well. I think he gets overlooked. I think He gets a raw deal here in the 21st century.
You're pretty passionate about James
I am.
Madison.
James Madison needs some more recognition because honestly, this guy did basically everything you could ask out of the guy. Well, when we come back, we want to wrap things up with our commentary segment. Keep it locked. You're watching The Waynesburg Effect.
Can I help you? Oh, I'm depression. I've come for you. What? Depression. You know, the thing that makes people angry. I keep them up at night. Oh, I give them anxiety. You know, I get up on their heads. That's crazy. I know. The government likes to think that I'm a mental illness. Well, then shouldn't you be wearing a cape? Why? So people could see me coming? No, I've got 12.6% of American college students already. There's no one I can't get.
For more information, visit www.acha.org.
Welcome back to The Waynesburg Effect. We close today's show with our usual commentary section where each panelist chooses their own topic. Jared, you're first. What's going on?
Well, there's not too many things that grind my gears in related to sports, but one of the things is how people, especially older fans of the NHL, like to diss on the NHL All-Star Game and the All-Star break in general, just because they're not into it, so they think the NHL should take it away. But I think it's great for the NHL. It helps keep the game relevant, even when there's a 10-day break. It's a good way for kids to see athletes more in a personable stance. You know, they're out there just doing skills competitions and having fun instead of playing games where they're trying to literally hurt the other guys and win. You know, I mean, that's not a bad thing, of course, but I do think that it's great for the game of hockey, and and I think if some people got their way and the NHL All-Star Game was abandoned, that the NHL would suffer from that.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to go with Tom Brady. It's been time for the last 3 years. Stop the debate about the greatest quarterback all the time. It's not a debate. It's not even close. 9 Super Bowl appearances for one player. That's more than every team in the league. It's incredible. He has more than the Steelers, more appearances than the Cowboys. It's simply phenomenal. And if he wins this Super Bowl, he'll have 6 Super Bowls, which will be tied with the Steelers. As much as that pains me to say, he'll be tied with the Steelers. Him and Belichick together, the greatest duo to ever exist, and I think in all of sports. And when it comes to the greatest quarterback of all time, Joe Montana's not even close. Yeah, he was 4 for 4. Brady is going to be maybe 6 for 9. I mean, you just got to look at the volume. 50% of his career, he's been in the Super Bowl. It's simply remarkable.
But the thing with Brady is his kryptonite in Super Bowls is average quarterbacks. Eli Manning and Nick Foles. Anyways, I want to talk about the missed call seen around the world. It was in the end of the Saints and Rams game. It was obvious pass interference, but no flag was thrown, and that's a game-changing call that you have to make because the Saints get that call, they milk the clock down, they kick a chip shot field goal, they go to the Super Bowl, and we have a different legacy for Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Having said that, on the other side of the argument, there's also the missed face mask call on Jared Goff that could have potentially scored a touchdown. So I think overall the officiating in the NFL has got to be better.
I think we can all agree on that one. So life as a college student can be stressful. You have a million things floating around in your head at once, and a lot of times you wish there was a way to sort of quiet that inner voice, that voice telling you need to get this done, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to look better, you need to do better. There is. It's called meditation, and this is something that's new to me. Haven't, really tried it. I started it over Christmas break. I read a book by Dan Harris of NBC News called 10% Happier. He talks about how being very pessimistic about meditation and sort of his journey in learning the practice, and now he uses it every day, and he was able to kick a drug habit, and it really improved everything. And I have to admit, I was skeptical as well when I started it, but he has an app. It's called the 10% Happier app based on the book, and it's very, very impactful. And when you learn the practice and you start really sort of calming that inner mind voice saying all these things, it's really helpful, and it doesn't cure all of life's problems, but it does make you 10% happier. As always, we would like to thank you for watching this episode of The Waynesburg Effect. Tune in next time for more political debates on WCTV's only political talk show.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.